This is number seven podcast.
Number 7 podcast.
Welcome back to Number 7 Podcast, everyone. Don't go anywhere. This deep dive may change your mind and your life for good. This is a self-improvement episode, and we're going to be exploring some powerful ideas about unlocking your potential, even if you feel like you have almost zero free time. Whether you're a seasoned pro at this whole personal growth thing or just starting out again, I think you'll find something valuable here.
Yeah, and I think what's fascinating about this is that instead of like giving you a bunch of tips and tricks, like do this, do that kind of thing, we're going to start with kind of a fundamental choice you face. And that is the immediate difficulty of changing your situation or the long-term struggle of living with the regret of like, what if? What if I had tried? What if I had gone for it? And, both are difficult, but only one leads to progress.
It really sets the stage, doesn't it? It's not about whether change is hard. It's about choosing which kind of hard you're willing to face.
Yeah, exactly.
And then that leads us to this idea of clarity, right?
Right.
That you can't just want things to be different. You have to define what you want.
Yeah.
And then be ruthless about figuring out which actions actually move you towards that goal and which ones are just distractions.
Yeah, and I think I see a lot of people get stuck in this cycle of busy work, feeling productive, but not actually getting any closer to what they truly desire.
Yes.
Yeah.
It's about being intentional with your time and energy, even if you only have a little bit to spare. That's what's so exciting about this.
Yeah.
You don't need hours and hours. It's really about focused effort over a short period of time.
That's right. Even if you only have like 1 to 2 hours each day consistently, you can make dramatic progress in your life over the next 6 to 12 months.
I love that. And it makes me think about all those success stories you hear about people building side hustles.
Yeah.
While working full-time jobs.
Yeah.
It's about leveraging those pockets of time you do have, not wishing you had more.
It's true. And it makes you think about that traditional 8-hour workday model.
Right.
And, maybe instead of thinking we need more hours, we need to rethink how we're using the hours we have.
Yep. Yeah. Okay, this next part I think is key because it gets to the heart of how do we make those hours count? And, there's this powerful equation from author Cal Newport. Work accomplished equals time spent multiplied by intensity of focus.
Oh, it seems so simple, yet it's so profound. Because like 2 people could spend the same amount of time on a task, but the one who's truly focused, who's able to minimize distractions and really immerse themselves in the work, will achieve far better results.
It makes me wonder, what if we were taught how to cultivate focus from a young age?
That's a great question.
Instead of just being told to sit still and be quiet.
So much of our education system is still geared towards compliance rather than cultivating like deep engagement. But I want to bring this back to you, the listener. Think about a time when you were completely absorbed in something, maybe a hobby or a project that you were working on. You probably lost track of time and the work felt effortless.
That's what we're aiming for here, right? It's not about forcing yourself to focus. It's about finding ways to tap into that state of flow where work becomes almost like play.
Yes.
And that brings us to another really important piece of the puzzle, and that's belief. The power of truly believing in the possibility of achieving your goals, I think, can't be overstated.
And it's so important.
It's like having an inner cheerleader who's always rooting for you, even when you hit roadblocks or start to doubt yourself.
Yeah.
And I love that this concept ties into like some real psychological ideas like self-efficacy,
Yeah.
That sense of being capable,
Yeah.
and then the growth mindset, which tells us our abilities aren't fixed, but can be developed through effort and learning.
That's right. Instead of saying, I don't have enough time or I'm not good enough, it's about shifting that internal dialogue to say, I can figure this out or I'm willing to learn and grow. And that's what fuels your commitment. That keeps you going when things get tough.
And speaking of commitment, that brings us to this idea of planning, right?
Okay.
This source is a big advocate for detailed daily planning as a way to avoid wasted time, decision fatigue, and that feeling of being pulled in a million directions.
I think planning is important. But is a detailed hourly schedule realistic for everyone? I'm not so sure. I think it depends on your personality and your work style. The key is to find a level of planning that works for you, whether that's a general outline for your day or a minute-by-minute schedule.
Yeah, that's a great point. It's about what works for you and being consistent.
Exactly. Yeah. And it's not just about planning your work. It's also about making time for things that energize you, like exercise, spending time with loved ones, or pursuing a hobby.
Yeah, it's all connected, isn't it? If you're constantly burnt out and depleted, you won't be able to focus on your goals no matter how good your plan is.
Right.
Which kind of brings us to, I think, the big challenge we all face, which is distractions.
Right. Oh, it's so easy to get pulled in a million directions, especially, with technology constantly vying for our attention. But what's fascinating is that, a lot of times these external distractions like devices, they're actually less impactful than these internal triggers that make us want to get distracted.
Oh, so we're not just fighting against notifications and emails, but we're also fighting against our own minds.
Yeah, exactly. Think about those moments when you're trying to work, but you keep thinking about an unfinished task or an unresolved conflict or that email you've been avoiding. Those are internal triggers, and they can be far more insidious than any external distraction.
So how do we deal with these internal triggers? It sounds like we need to become masters of our own minds.
That's a great way to put it. And one really powerful technique is simply delaying gratification. So instead of instantly giving in to the urge to check your phone or jump to another task, give yourself 10 minutes, just 10 minutes.
That sounds almost too simple, but I can see how it would work. Like by pausing, you give yourself a chance to kind of acknowledge that internal trigger and almost observe the urge without judgment, and then make a conscious choice about how you want to proceed.
Exactly. And it's about reclaiming control over your attention and directing it towards what truly matters. And another helpful tool is journaling. By tracking what activities enhance or hinder your productivity, you can start to identify patterns.
Yeah, it's like becoming a scientist of your own mind.
Right.
Experimenting with different approaches and seeing what works best for you.
Exactly. Maybe you realize that getting 30 minutes of exercise in the morning dramatically improves your focus. Or that having a cluttered workspace completely sabotages your productivity.
That's interesting. Okay, so this next part, I have definitely fallen prey to this idea that willpower is a finite resource that depletes throughout the day. I'm curious to hear your thoughts on this.
That's a myth that we need to bust. It's not a muscle that gets tired. It's more about your belief in your ability to achieve your goals.
So if I believe I can stick to my healthy eating plan, I'm more likely to make choices that support that belief, regardless of what time of day it is.
That's right. And that ties back to everything we've been talking about. Clarity, focus, belief. These elements work together to create a powerful force that drives you forward.
I love this. This is a total game changer for me to think about willpower in this way. But let's be honest, even with the best intentions and a strong belief system, life can get messy.
Right.
We all have responsibilities and obligations that can feel overwhelming at times. So how do we navigate that?
Well, that's where the power of planning comes in again. Remember the suggestion of planning your day down to the hour.
Right.
While that might not be feasible for everyone, I can see how having a clear roadmap for your day could help you stay on track even when unexpected challenges pop up.
Yeah. It's about creating a structure that supports your goals and values, so you're not constantly reacting to whatever fire happens to be burning brightest at the moment. It makes me think about, all the different time management systems and productivity hacks that are out there.
Right.
And it can be so overwhelming, to try to figure out what works best.
Well, and that's why it's important to remember that there's no one-size-fits-all approach. The best system is the one that you'll actually use consistently, and that fits your individual needs and personality.
Yeah. So how do we cut through the noise and find what works for us?
It starts with self-awareness. Experiment with different techniques. Pay attention to what helps you feel energized and focused. And, don't be afraid to adjust your approach as needed.
It reminds me of something we were talking about earlier about this 8-hour workday model, and maybe how that's not the best way to kind of tap into our individual potential.
It's a really interesting thought. If we weren't bound by this arbitrary structure, how might we organize our work and our lives differently?
Would we be more productive, more creative, more fulfilled? These are big questions, and I'm not sure there are any easy answers.
But maybe just asking those questions is a step in the right direction. It challenges us to think critically about the assumptions we've inherited and to explore alternative ways of working that might better align with our individual needs and aspirations.
Speaking of individual potential, let's kind of go back to this concept of focus for a moment. Do you remember that equation from Cal Newport? Work accomplished equals time spent multiplied by intensity of focus.
Such a powerful reminder that it's not just about putting in the hours, but it's about being present and engaged in the work you're doing.
Yeah, imagine two people dedicating the same amount of time to a task. The one who's deeply focused, who's able to shut out distractions and fully immerse themselves in the work, is going to achieve far greater results than the one who's constantly checking their phone or letting their mind wander.
It's true. It's a brilliant visualization of how focus can amplify our efforts and accelerate our progress. But cultivating that laser-like focus isn't always easy, especially in today's hyper-connected world.
So, how do we train our minds to stay focused even when surrounded by distractions?
It starts with understanding what triggers those distractions in the first place. Remember those internal triggers we talked about?
Unfinished tasks, unresolved emotions, those general anxieties that make us crave distractions.
Exactly. We need to become students of our own minds to observe those internal triggers without judgment and develop strategies for dealing with them.
So instead of beating ourselves up for getting distracted, we need to approach it with curiosity and compassion.
Exactly. It's about recognizing that distractions are a natural part of being human and that we can train our minds to become more resilient in the face of them.
Yeah, and I think it's important to remember that even small distractions can add up over time.
Oh, it's like death by 1,000 paper cuts. Each distraction might seem insignificant on its own, but collectively they can chip away at our focus and hinder our ability to achieve our goals.
So what are some practical strategies for managing these distractions?
Well, we already discussed delaying gratification, which is incredibly powerful. Another helpful technique is to create a distraction-free environment.
So that might mean putting your phone on airplane mode or closing unnecessary tabs on your computer.
Yeah.
Or even finding a quiet space to work where you won't be interrupted.
That's right. It's about setting yourself up for success by minimizing those external distractions and creating a space that promotes focus.
But what about those internal distractions? How do we deal with those pesky thoughts and anxieties that just keep popping into our heads?
Well, that's where mindfulness practices like meditation can be incredibly helpful. By learning to observe our thoughts and feelings without judgment, we can start to detach from them and create space for greater focus and clarity.
So it's like training your mind to become less reactive to those internal distractions so they have less power over you.
Exactly. And mindfulness is a skill that takes practice. So be patient with yourself and don't get discouraged if you find your mind wandering. Just gently redirect your attention back to the present moment.
And I think if you find yourself struggling to stay focused, remember that journaling technique we were talking about earlier.
That's a great tool.
Where you track your activities and notice what helps you feel more focused and productive. You start to identify patterns and create a personalized strategy for managing distractions.
That's right.
This is all starting to feel like a really powerful toolkit for unlocking our potential. But let's be honest, even with all the right tools and techniques, there are going to be times when we feel stuck or discouraged.
Of course, yeah.
So how do we navigate those challenging moments? How do we stay motivated and keep moving forward, even when it feels like we're taking 2 steps back for every 1 step forward?
Well, that's where self-compassion comes in. It's about treating yourself with the same kindness and understanding that you would offer a close friend who's going through a difficult time.
So instead of beating ourselves up for our mistakes or, perceived shortcomings, we need to acknowledge that we're doing the best we can with the resources we have at this moment.
That's right. Self-compassion isn't about letting ourselves off the hook or making excuses. It's about creating a more supportive inner environment that allows us to learn and grow from our experiences.
This is such a powerful reminder that personal growth is a journey, not a destination.
That's right. It's a journey that's best traveled with a sense of curiosity, self-awareness, and a willingness to experiment and learn along the way.
So before we move on to the final part of our deep dive, I want to take a moment to reflect on everything we've covered so far. We've explored the importance of clarity, focus, belief, planning, and managing distractions. We've challenged that traditional 8-hour workday model and explored alternative ways of thinking about work and productivity. We've delved into the power of willpower, self-compassion, and the growth mindset. And we've really emphasized the importance of self-awareness, experimentation, and finding what works best for you as an individual. Now, in the final part of our deep dive, we'll explore some strategies for putting all of these ideas into action and creating lasting change in your life.
Oh, okay. So much good stuff already. And I love this part because we're going to talk about how to actually do it, right? We've talked about all this theory.
Right.
But how do we actually take action and make real change?
It's one thing to understand these concepts intellectually,
Yeah.
but quite another to embody them in our daily actions and choices.
So true.
Like there's often a gap between knowing and
A
doing.
huge leap. Yeah. Yeah. So how do we bridge that? And I think that's what I appreciate about this approach, is that it doesn't just leave us with these theories. It actually gives us concrete strategies for putting these principles into practice.
Okay, so where do we begin?
Well, he emphasizes the importance of starting small. So, instead of trying to overhaul your entire life overnight,
Right.
just focus on making 1 or 2 small changes at a time.
It's like building a muscle. You wouldn't expect to bench press 200 pounds on your first day at the gym, right? You'd start with a weight that's challenging but manageable and gradually increase the weight as you get stronger.
I love that analogy. That's a great analogy.
So it's the same with personal growth.
Yeah.
By focusing on making small, incremental changes, you build momentum and confidence, which makes it easier to tackle bigger challenges over time.
Exactly. Yeah.
So what are some examples of small changes we could make?
Well, it could be something as simple as committing to waking up 15 minutes earlier each day to create space for a morning routine, or dedicating 30 minutes each evening to working on a side project. That sounds doable, even for someone who feels super busy.
That's the point.
Hmm.
The key is to choose changes that feel aligned with your goals and values, and that you can realistically integrate into your current lifestyle.
And I think it's not just about adding new habits, but it's also about letting go of old ones that no longer serve us.
Right.
Like
Absolutely.
that could involve cutting back on social media, eliminating unnecessary commitments, or setting boundaries around your time and energy.
That's right. And that can be really challenging, especially in a culture that often glorifies busyness and productivity.
Right.
And so I think that's why it's important to remember your why.
Yeah.
Why are you making these changes? What are you hoping to achieve?
Yeah. Connecting back to your values and your goals, that can help you stay motivated
Absolutely.
and make those difficult choices.
Yeah.
It's a process. And I think this is so important to remember, that change is a process, not a destination.
Right.
You're going to have times where you slip up or feel discouraged. It's like learning to ride a bike. You're going to fall a few times before you find your balance.
That's a perfect analogy.
Yeah.
So the key is to be patient with yourself.
Right.
Learn from your mistakes and keep practicing.
And that's where self-compassion comes in again.
Right.
Instead of beating ourselves up when we stumble, we need to offer ourselves the same kindness and understanding that we would offer a close friend.
So true. It's about recognizing that we're all human and that we're all doing the best we can with the resources we have at this moment.
That's right.
And as we continue on this journey of personal growth, I think it's so important to remember that we're not alone.
We're not alone. There's a whole community of people out there who are committed to living more intentional and fulfilling lives.
And there are so many resources available
So many resources.
to support us, from books and podcasts to coaches and mentors.
That's right. Don't be afraid to reach out for help when you need it.
This has been such a great deep dive. I feel like we've explored so many powerful ideas about unlocking our potential and creating lives that are truly aligned with our values and aspirations.
I agree. Yeah.
And I hope that our listeners feel really inspired
Yeah, I hope so too.
to take action, to put these ideas into practice. And remember, even small, consistent efforts fueled by a strong belief system can lead to extraordinary results. It's about focusing on what you can control, taking ownership of your choices, and never giving up on your dreams. Thank you for joining us on Number 7 Podcast.